Hello, everybody, and welcome to the next edition of the Frank and Stan chat. And as you can see, it is just Frank and Stan today. Hello, Stan.
Hi, is next edition because you can't remember the number?
I think it's 44. I
Yeah, I
think it
think it
is.
is. I think it is.
Yeah, actually, you worked it out. You know me too well, Stan. I didn't want to go. Oh, welcome to. Oh, I think it's number 44. We're on a Saturday morning, aren't we?
Yeah, that's my fault. I was busy on a
Oh,
Friday morning.
what were you doing yesterday then?
It was a Zoom meeting with the schools that we support with Paul Duckworth doing a briefing for them. About 2 hours of briefing.
Well,
Very good.
I couldn't do yesterday morning either. I was talking or listening to probably about 50 Blackpool primary and special school heads. And of course their thoughts are on Monday, aren't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, quite a lot. I mean, I was interested to see a tweet yesterday. I won't tell you who it's from because I don't want to criticize them too much. But actually, there was on Friday a whole sort of group of head teachers came together on Friday for some training and development, and I'm thinking, well, it's just about decision making, isn't it? I probably wouldn't have done that.
No.
I probably wouldn't have done that. But anyway, what's caught your eye this week, Stan?
Well, it goes back to that, and I think what caught my eye was the dedication of those school leaders, and how much they were up for Monday.
Hmm.
Just bring it on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wishing people in the messages, wishing you good luck for Monday and everything, but it was just that complete commitment to what they want to do and get on with it. I
Yeah.
was very different from the last time, I think, where I said there were a lot of time just before Christmas. I think it was a lot of what looked like very tired head teachers.
Yeah. Yeah.
This time they seemed energized. They seemed ready to go.
It's nice. I mean, I said to the Blackpool heads, it would be nice if every half term was 3 weeks, wouldn't it? But in a way, that I
Yeah,
think that has helped the sort of the mindset really around this.
yeah,
And also the fact that I still think that all teachers should have been vaccinated. But having said that, the older team of teachers will have been vaccinated, and I'm not suggesting at all that 30-year-olds or 40-year-olds, I'm not sure whether they're at more risk or not. I mean, I do hear people saying, well, the risk is much lower, but actually there is a risk,
yeah.
and if I was one of them, I would be worried.
I think a lot of it depends on where you look for your research as well.
Mm.
I mean, I saw it, and I know there's a bias in this, but I saw a piece, I think it was on Twitter, that had come from some Spanish research with the new variant of COVID that was showing that children were ill and weren't recovering quite as fast with it.
Oh,
And
right. Yes.
it was transmissible as much as anything else, and that was in younger children.
Yeah.
But you can equally go to another piece of evidence that says no, there's no transmission, there's no nothing. So
Yeah.
I think the problem is that you tend to drift towards what you want to believe is true and
Yes. Yes.
find the evidence to support your
Well,
belief.
that's interesting. You should say that because that actually leads into my what's caught my eye this week. Um, it's a At the end of the day, it's about. I've been struggling, to be honest, to get onto YouTube a video that I did with a guy called Joe Dundas, who was the communications manager at the Co-op Academies Trust, and we basically chatted about the work that we did for about 5 years together. Not putting ourselves out there as experts in terms of communication, brand, tone of voice, website, social media, all of that. We're not, but Joe is really now. And what caught my eye after I did this recording, managed to get it up onto YouTube, was I found out that the government has been funding sponsored articles in newspapers, running on websites, telling positive stories about Brexit. Now, the issue here is around, is that right?
Mm.
Is that right? Because actually, if we're taking a sort of balanced view, you would say, well, I probably could stand a positive message being sponsored about Brexit if in a balanced way there was a negative sponsored article about Brexit. And the article showed that this wasn't just pervasive in hadn't just stretched to I think it was the Mail, the Sun, and one other newspaper. But actually, this approach had been taken towards local newspapers as well. So it's quite nationwide, shall we say?
Mm.
And it made me think about the issues that we were talking about previously about trust and honesty and being clear about messaging. So I sort of reflected on it and thought, bearing in mind what Joe and I have been trying to do. Yes, of course, you want to be positive, but actually, if there is a negative side, even within the messaging, good communication tackles that. It doesn't sort of, if you have an issue in your school, you can't, I don't know, something sprung up, which everybody knows about. You then send out communication. That's going to look pretty stupid if actually it doesn't address the issue that's really staring you in the face, because people are going to think, well, you don't really know what's going on, or you're choosing to ignore it. And unfortunately, I think the government is choosing to ignore bad messages.
Yeah, I just wonder, is there another organisation that's promoting all the negative stuff? I mean, in education, there are some groups now that are pushing various ways of teaching, ways of organising schools that don't appear to have any public accountability and ownership and who's responsible for them. There's a number now that you can pick up on Twitter particularly that are just not clear who they are, because their views do seem to coincide and they do seem to be, let's say, more on the right of things than the left.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a murky world around, particular groups that are actually, sponsored by people that we're not entirely clear about and what their motives are, who actually have the ear of ministers, whether that be, Labour or Tory. I mean, chances of it being a Labour government at the moment appear quite slim, but whatever it is, that is, I think a very deeply concerning issue. And I think it's interesting recently, have you noticed that I haven't read it yet, but I'm going to read it. I'm going to buy the Financial Times today because there is an article in there. And of course, there's a paywall, unfortunately, on Financial Times, which always does my head in when government ministers announce things in the Telegraph or in the Times or whatever. I mean, as if you've got to, I mean, in a way, that's a sponsorship, isn't it? But anyway, let's not go down that road. But in the Financial Times today, there is an article just saying, have exams have they reached the end? And I thought that's a really interesting sort of thought. I don't actually believe that they've reached the end, by the way.
No, I don't believe it, because there will have to be some kind of assessment of capability. I watched a really interesting TED talk called what was it called? Culture Before Curriculum. A guy called Hammond, and that really gets to the heart of that, because he starts to talk about how actually the school's culture is more important than the curriculum that we're choosing to teach.
Yes.
And because I'm doing a course next week on culture, I've been, reading up on it.
Oh, well, at least you've done a bit of research. Anybody watching his little talk next week, at least he's done a bit of prepping on it.
Little talk.
He's not doing a Frankenstein chat approach.
No, it's a proper course. I really, I love the underneath of culture. I've done a lot of work in the past over what makes culture and how it affects. And I just think what I've not thought, I always think about it in terms of the way the staff interact, the way the school works, the performance of the school. And what this did was to drag it back to the children and how that culture affects the way they become and grow up. And I was really intrigued by it.
It's interesting. The first school I ever taught in, our children went there, and actually 2 of the grandchildren are going to that primary school. And it was 1979, my first year of teaching, and it was not a very happy school. There was in that year of teaching, my first year, I only saw the head teacher once in my classroom, and that was to collect. The secretary was away, and I hadn't sent the register down, so he came up to collect it. That was the only time he stepped into my classroom. But somebody was saying, because you listen carefully to what people say in the staff room and what have you.
Yeah.
And I remember a teacher saying, that head teacher, he's never been the same since they took the 11 plus away. And so I said, what do you mean by that? So she said, well, actually, he knew how to get kids through the 11 plus. But actually, now we haven't got the 11 plus, he doesn't know what to do.
Well,
and there's something in that for me around where we may be heading, that actually there has been such a focus on examination outcomes that actually that's done something, not in some respects, not positively, to not just the curriculum, but the mindset of some teachers,
Yeah.
And actually the challenge, if we were to move towards less exams and perhaps a broader range of assessments, some of that lying with the teacher, and the challenge then for those teachers to actually have an evidence base to rely on, to be able to say, well, looking at a broader range of skills and capabilities, knowledge, this is the evidence I'm presenting. Actually, I think is a big challenge for some, less so for others. But I think I can see that this, any transition away from a full-on exam, approach could be quite challenging for some teachers, and probably supports the view that Amanda Spielman has pushed around curriculum. In terms of, I would say we need to go much, if the focus is on culture, just focusing on the curriculum alone is not going to produce, a better on its own. It's not going to produce a better experience for children. It's just going to give them a different bit of knowledge or skill development to follow. It's a much deeper thing than that. And I think that taking away of the exams for that guy was basically, took the floor away from him, really. And where do I go? What do I do?
Presumably, if he's still going, he'll be tutoring.
Yes, well, he's still. I'd be very surprised if he's still going. He was at the tail end of his career. I do remember also at Christmas time, it was about 350 children in the school, and on the last afternoon, of course, in those, nobody tells you what you get a message saying, right, head teacher wants all the children down in the hall, so we all marched down. And lots of children had sort of parcels and things, but basically this was alcohol that they were giving to the head teacher. And I sat there thinking, culture, oh, well, that'll all be divvied out, won't it? When we get to the staff room. Well, you imagine how much alcohol was there, with 350 children and virtually everybody giving him something, what I mean?
Well, the culture of the school is the head teacher gets all the rewards.
All the rewards, yeah, absolutely. But it's interesting. I think I learned more as a teacher. I've learned a lot from knowing that, learning or thinking, I don't want to be like that.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I don't think if that head teacher had come down and then divvied it all out, it probably would just reinforce what I think should have happened. But actually, it's stuck in my mind because it was so bad. And I think some of the work we've done when we've been observing or talking to senior leaders, or even in Ofsted days, having the good fortune of being able to see teachers working, when it's not gone well, those are the things that have stuck in my mind much more vividly than the ones that have gone really well. Because sometimes when it goes really well, nothing seems to be moving. It just seems to happen, but when it's not good, you can see the clunkiness of it,
I answered a request on somebody asking, when will I know? When will I be ready for headship as a
Right.
deputy? When will I know? And I sent a thing to say, that moment you think I could have done that better,
Yeah.
and that moment keeps coming. I wouldn't do it that way. I would do it then. That's the time then that you're ready to go on.
Well,
And
when
do it
did you
yourself.
think then? Well, how long was it before you thought, actually, I want to be a head teacher?
I've been a deputy for I was 5 years as a deputy, probably third or fourth year as a deputy. Thinking, yeah, I could, and it wasn't. I would do it better because I did have a good head at the time. I would do it differently. She had a very different approach than the one I would take, but she was a good manager and turned a difficult school round. It was quite an achievement.
Well,
But
that
I knew that I would do it differently,
yeah.
and then it got to feeling awkward when I was, I was the agent, if you like, for her change, and I didn't really agree with it. I wasn't 100% on board with it.
Well, mine was in the first term as a teacher because the head teacher was so ineffective, so unsighted that I thought, well, that's a doddle.
Yeah,
Honestly.
I do think you learn far more of how not to do things than you do.
Yeah.
Having a poor leader gives you far more intuition as to what needs to be done than following a really
Yeah.
good one.
But also the staff talk about it more as
Yeah.
well, don't they? So and actually they're analysing much more carefully the actions, and that probably you can get yourself into I certainly experienced this when I was a deputy. I went from, I'd never been in such a challenging school as before, and my first really, really, really challenging school was as a deputy. And that actually, I was starting to think, oh, I'm in a bit of a downward spiral here, because I don't seem to be, all that I've done before doesn't seem to be working quite as well, and I can see how head teachers get into that downward spiral as well, where they feel as though that they're unable to, to assert themselves. The actions they take seem as if they're not quite in tune with what's required, this sort of thing. And also there's this sort of, we talked many times before about imposter syndrome, but you do think, have I got over promoted? Am I actually beyond my skill level?
I think at headship, what moved me on from headship was the cycle of redoing things, and somebody saying we really need to look at the maths again, and me saying we've already done it, we've done that, we've bottomed it, and then this teacher saying, well, not why I've been here, and you think, oh, actually that was 4 years ago, possibly 5 years ago, and it seemed like right, it's I can't stay here and watch it all just I don't know, go into a malaise. And the other thing is, where the holes are, I think, when you're at that stage. And I was really hopeful and fortunate to find somebody who came later who recognized where those holes were and filled them.
Yeah. I think I'm trying to think back at, I don't think I actually worked with, and I have to say I worked with the school where I became deputy was the first female head teacher, and that colleague, I have a deep respect for that colleague because she was really determined that the kids were going to get a really good crack at this, and it was during the industrial action. So, I didn't take industrial action because that would have meant that she would have then had to look after, with the midday staff, 350 kids. So, and that put us up against the teaching staff who really basically wanted the school to close. But there was a real, that negativity really forced me to think deeply about who was I doing this for, and actually how important I was to her. She wasn't the easiest person to work with by any means, but the one thing you couldn't argue with was that she was doing it for the right reason.
All the heads I worked for through my teaching career were all female. Never worked with a male head. In fact, I think one, two, three, four, maybe four other male teachers are all I came across in my primary teaching career.
I had three male and then a female, and then I got a headship. But yeah, it's interesting. I actually was contacted by somebody who was a pupil at only last week at my first school, and it's really interesting. He wanted to thank me for setting up a football team, a school football team, and it was really fascinating because he was able now further down the line to understand that bit of engagement was what kept him in school and kept him interested, in what he was doing. And I thought, many times when I thought, I haven't got time for this, why am I doing this? And also his memory of the team was that we were beating everybody in the local authority, and we were probably winning 2 out of 10 games, but his memory was of sweeping the board, glorious goals from 20 yards.
I think I've probably told this one before. I was on Tesco car park, and this man came up to me with his grandchildren and said, "Mr. Johnson," and I said, "Oh yeah, it's Paul. Tell me grandchildren about that goal I scored." Paul, who? Goal you scored?
Oh dear. But
Tell me about that goal you scored. I scored. As if, it's lovely that's a memory that he's obviously clearly got.
Yeah.
But the fact that he considered that this teacher, 30, 40 years on from teaching him, would remember the goal he scored.
Right. Well, let's get on to word of the week, because we are well over nearly 25 minutes into this chat. What's your word of the week, Stan? Is it an English word?
Yes, it is. And it's dedication. It's what I started with today, and the roots of it are around devotion and consecration. So dedication originally was dedication to a deity, to give your life to a deity, whereas now it's for a purpose. And I just think there's something that brings people into the teaching profession that has an element of dedication to it.
Yeah.
And it's, if you do recognize it does slip now and again, and then you remember, as you just said, what am I really here for? It's so these children get the best chances in life that they get. That grounds you quite often, I think, when you're struggling. And that's what I saw in these heads this week, these school leaders, I should say, because they weren't all heads, but that actually, to look them in the eye, they were still there for the children. That's what was important.
Yeah. Well, my word is inflation. Okay, so I it's all about messaging, isn't it? There seems to be a theme here around effective communication. The origins of the word inflation are actually all to do with flatulence. and they're sort of like I think it comes from Latin. And then the actual use of the word inflation to talk about monetary inflation came in the 1830s. But actually, I am absolutely gobsmacked. And in a way, flatulence is a useful word to think of when I talk about what I'm going to say now. A 1% pay rise for nurses is the recommendation. And I'm thinking, this is not looking good, is it? Because there's just too much wastage. There's been too much spending on stuff that hasn't worked. And this week, I think we found out that there was quite a large sum of money spent on Downing Street's communications centre.
Yeah,
I understand that, bearing in mind they're having to do these various things, but it's all around timing, isn't it? It's all around timing.
And didn't Dominic Cummings get a £40,000 pay rise?
Was it £380,000 payoff for the bullying case?
Yeah.
I mean, on top of test and trace, PPE, honestly, I think to say we haven't got the money.
Yeah, to say what's affordable was I think was a spin error.
Yeah.
To say, I mean, and they backed out and sort of said, but the public sector isn't getting any, so this is 1% above, and that might have been a better way to start their argument rather than it's what's affordable,
Yeah.
especially as she nailed him with this time last year. You said people had to be paid a fair wage.
Yes.
Is it fair? That's.
But it's just words, isn't it? It's words to get over that little hurdle, and
Well, it goes back to the whole tenet of it all, isn't it? That we brazen it out.
Yeah.
We double down on it. We brazen it out. We don't. You talked about there the Home Secretary having a payoff for the person who went to effectively to stop it going to a tribunal where they'd have to produce witnesses, and that would have been really bad. But you keep your post.
Mm. Well, we talked with Andy, didn't we? Andy Hodgkinson a few months ago about this, and if that sort of stuff had happened, you imagine that on at a governing body level.
Yeah.
Well, we want to keep the head in post. There's probably some pretty strong evidence here that they may have been bullied. What we'll do is we'll pay somebody off with a massive lump sum.
Yeah. And an agreement that they won't
staff room. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, it is phenomenal. So my word is inflation, because actually I think the two meanings of that are in there, because basically somebody is not treating somebody with sufficient respect.
No. And the cost of the thing that got me, Frank, and it drove me. I was stomping around the house. It was a news item that said, "Okay, we owe all this money. How can we keep borrowing, and where are we borrowing the money from?" And they said 97% of what we borrow is from the Bank of England.
Yeah, I know. Well, apparently Richard.
So it's like saying, "Well, I've taken it out of this pocket and I've put it in this pocket, but I can't spend anything. So I can put it back in that pocket."
Absolutely, and apparently, I learnt. I can't remember where I gathered this. I think it might have been from when I was doing my banking exams in the early 70s. But Richard Nixon, there was a link between how much gold you had and how much currency you could produce. This was to stop that hyperinflation, and obviously gold being a sort of a rare commodity, that meant actually, there was a restriction. Well, apparently Nixon stopped that. So that actually meant the link with the gold actually wasn't. So basically it was a free for all. You could produce as much money as you like, and in a way, money means nothing, does it? I mean, we produce quantitative easing. Sorry, I'm on a roll now, but quantitative easing is producing money.
Yeah, just
if you put more money into the system, the money's worth less. We've got to understand that. It may be worth £1, but actually it's not going to be worth anything eventually. You know what I mean? Because there's going to be so much of it swimming around. And it's not as if they print it. Somebody somewhere says, "Oh, we want bung another couple of billion on that, will you?" And they just put the numbers in a keyboard, and that's produced the money,
Yeah, but it's just this, because forever, whenever there's coming up to an election, and whenever we talk about saving money, they always go, if you're in a house, if you're in a household budget, you can't spend more than you can bring it, and it's absolutely non-comparable with a household budget.
No, absolutely correct.
So why do we keep making that metaphor? That it's just the same as running your own home budget. It's not. If your home budget happens to be taking money from one room and putting it in the other.
or you in the garden stand producing more money.
Yeah, I'll have to go to the summer house though for this month. But I'm only lending it you, and you'll have to pay it back.
I know, at zero interest.
Yeah. Well, if we do go, because there was a threat at one point, we were going to go into negative.
Yes.
So presumably, then the Bank of England would owe the government a lot more money. I'm glad I'm not into finance.
No, but in a way, it's a really interesting story, where you wheel out a health minister who actually stopped being an MP, still got paid, but actually went to be, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and earned that on the side, wheel that person out to tell the nurses they can have their 1%. I think, no. I don't know why I'm seeing it in this way. I don't know why everybody else isn't up in arms. I mean,
well, I think they are. I think I saw something from Gary Neville saying, let's have a protest. And there was a suggestion on TV that on a Thursday, they do a slow hand clap for the government. Well, I'm sorry, I would happily and did happily go out and clap the NHS. I'm not going out in the freezing cold to slow hand clap someone.
Yeah. But all of that looks very, very shallow, doesn't it now?
Yeah, it does.
It does. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, we have changed the world. We have gone over time. Next week.
With no script.
No script. Well, I hope people have enjoyed our little rants and our little chats, and it's kept their spirits high. And I wish all the teachers and school staff next week all the best. And I hope that they keep the windows open and the bloody kids wear their masks and everybody does whatever they can, to keep as many people safe as possible.
Yeah, and concentrate on socializing and having fun and getting back to routines.
Yeah.
And let's try and lose the phrase lost,
catch up,
and catch up.
Yeah. Well, let's think back to, I mean, we've had some great guests, haven't we? But Mike Rotherham, his view was, not all, let's face it, not all. And in a way, this is probably a key point, isn't it? You can't treat all the children the same because all of their experiences are not the same. So these blanket statements about, but actually some children have moved on. Some children have had a good experience.
I read a blog that chimed so closely with what Mike was saying about somebody who was obviously not in education, but having to do home teaching, had realised just some of the nonsense that was in the current curriculum. And it's just said, why are we doing this?
I know.
My children aren't enjoying reading now. They have enjoyed reading with Dad when we've been doing it, but we haven't gone through the characters and analysed them. We've just enjoyed the story. I'll fancy that.
Yeah. Well, I seem to remember that's why you read books, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes, Frank.
Yeah.
I asked that. I used to ask that of teachers or the literacy team, saying when you're on holiday and you're reading that trashy novel by the pool, do you go, oh, actually, I would put a full-time verbal in there or do you just read it for fun?
Yeah. Okay, well, let's end on the word fun. And everybody has fun next week. And we'll see you all next week. We've got Michael Payne, the leader of the Forum Strategy, an organisation that supports and develops CEOs. So Michael's joining us next week. So look forward to seeing you all next week.
Is it going to be like an interview for us, Frank? Have we got a chance?
Well, gosh, I have said I have not got any more interviews in me, Stan. I'm interviewed out, and I'm, if somebody interviewed you, said you could, is there a job that you would be willing to get interviewed for, Stan?
Not at the moment. I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Me too. Okay. Well, we'll see you all next week.